Hi, everybody. I'm an addict. My name is Tom. And it's wonderful to be here this morning. There's probably some other places I could be on a Friday morning and some other stuff I could be doing, but there's probably no better place I could be and probably nothing better that I could be doing. I love recovery. I love the 12 steps. I love the Big Book, and I love Cocaine Anonymous. And hopefully there's some people here who are jacked about recovery. I'm truly grateful to be here. I want to thank the committee. It's an honor and a privilege always to do service. I want to thank Randy for that introduction. What a blessing it is to be here, to be involved in this. And I want to thank the readers, Catherine, Ian, and Linda, and Kerry for chair emceeing. And I especially want to thank Ian for your sneakers. I got to tell you that I had some awesome prayer and meditation this morning, and I thought that was the highlight of the day, but now there's a new highlight, and I love your shoes. I was sitting with a friend of mine. She said, I have to get those shoes. Sometimes I wonder why I'm even here. It's like, what the hell am I doing here? I mean, I don't even like cocaine. I just like the smell of it, And, yeah, that's not true. I love cocaine. And, cocaine worked for me. And if it still worked, you'd have a different speaker this morning. I love cocaine. We'll talk about that in a minute. The fine print. I'm an addict. My name is Tom Roach. And my clean date is June 26th, 2001. And I'm really nervous this morning. And, the funny thing is I always get nervous. I always get a little nervous when I speak, but I'm especially nervous this morning. I guess it's just a big deal for me. And just so blessed to be here. It's funny. A few guys asked me about being nervous this morning, and I was saying, yeah. Now, one of them, a friend of mine's wearing a green shirt, and it reminded me that, a few years ago, I was speaking at a conference, and I was talking to the person who was organizing the conference right before talking, and there was a friend of his there that I didn't know, and he was wearing a green shirt, a green polo shirt, and he asked me, "Are you nervous?" And I said, "Yeah, actually, I am a little nervous." And he goes, well, this is what you do when you're nervous. What you do is when you get up there, you just look out and you imagine that everyone is naked. And that will relax you. I got to tell you, that's not what, I just did that in my head. That's not what's happening. Actually, what I'd really like to do is just kind of ask everybody to just stay seated, while I'm talking. That could be a little disconcerting. And I'm a recovered addict. I'm just not that recovered, and so that would just help me out. I look out here and I see a bunch of people that are considerably younger than I am. And you're probably saying to yourself, how am I going to identify with this old guy up there, and how are we the same, all that stuff. By the way, I know all about the face space and the flitter. Yeah. I am so down with that. I feel you. I feel you. I know what's going on. And it turns out that this whole thing actually turns out to be about making OMG my BFF, right? That's what this deal is. I'm going to get going here. I'm going to get going here in a few minutes, sure. And, I'm probably going to speak liberally from the Big Book. And I say that in two ways. I'm actually a fan of the book. And, my public service announcement today is, prevent truth decay, read the book. And I'm also going to talk liberally because, the book is written, Alcoholics Anonymous is our basic text in Cocaine Anonymous, so I'll probably go back and forth as far as the terminology if I say alcohol or cocaine, just based on what I'm talking about in the book. I want to read a little non-conference approved literature. One of the things I was thinking about is, we use the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous And I actually qualify for that fellowship, too. I didn't know it at first. I knew about this. But, there are some differences between alcoholics and addicts. And one of them, if you've been here for a few minutes, you've probably heard. An alcoholic and an addict, they'll both steal your wallet. But then the addict will help you look for it. We are sneaky. Look, we're sneaky. But it turns out alcoholics are sneaky, too. We've both got sneaky genes, but we've got that gene on steroids. We're sneaky. And one of the big differences between alcoholics and addicts, and many of us are both, but an alcoholic gets up in the morning or comes to, whatever that is, and he's got work to do. He's got to go find the ways and the means to go find $10 so that he can get a bottle, bottle of cheap wine or vodka, whatever that is, and then he's pretty much set for the day. Well, I get up and I have the same problem. I got to go, get it. Now, I go out and I, tell another story, tell another lie, do that, whatever that is, and I get my $10 just like him. You know what the difference is? I'm about $190 short. I got work to do. It's going to be a long, finding the ways and means. What we do, it's not easy. If you're sitting here, man, you got to work at that stuff. And so I'm going to read a couple things, non-conference approved literature to get started here. If you've ever been through a big book study or step series with me, my favorite part of the meeting is the lighter side. I usually like to read something that relates to what I'm talking about or to me. And there's a couple things, when I think of myself, I think of when I get here. And, I have two big problems. I'm intellectually arrogant and I'm spiritually arrogant, steps 1 and 2. And these kind of talk to that. So, non-conference approved literature. And this, if you've been around for a while, you may have heard the first one. A DEA officer stops at a ranch in Texas and talks with an old rancher. He tells the rancher, "I need to inspect your ranch for illegally grown drugs." The rancher says, "Okay, but do not go in that field over there," as he points out the location. The DEA officer verbally explodes, saying, "Mister, I have the authority of the federal government with me." Reaching into his rear pants pocket, he removes his badge and proudly displays it to the rancher. "See this badge? This badge means I'm allowed to go wherever I wish, on any land. No questions asked or answers given. Have I made myself clear? Do you understand?" The rancher nods politely, apologizes, and goes about his chores. A short time later, the old rancher hears loud screams and sees the DEA officer running for his life, being chased by the rancher's big Santa Gertrudis bull. With every step, the bull is gaining ground on the officer, and it seems likely that he'll get gored before he reaches safety. The officer is clearly terrified. The rancher throws down his tools, runs to the fence, and yells at the top of his lungs, "Your badge! Show him your badge!" And that reminds me that intellectual arrogance probably won't serve me that well in here. Turns out I have an even bigger problem, and that's a step 1 deal, and it turns out I have a bigger problem than that. I come here the unbeliever. We'll talk about that as we go on. And that's a rough deal if we read this book, and I just wasn't willing to drink the Kool-Aid. And this is for a guy like me who's unwilling to drink the Kool-Aid. I shared my clean date, June 26, 2001, but I've been clean for 18 of the last 20 years, and most of the 90s, and had a really bad relapse in 99. I'll go into my story in a minute. And that first tour through the rooms, through the 90s, clean and sober most of the 90s, unencumbered by sponsorship, the steps, or a higher power. Yeah. This is how well that served me. It always reminds me. An atheist was walking through the woods. What majestic trees, what powerful rivers, what beautiful animals, he said to himself. As he was walking alongside the river, he heard a rustling in the bushes behind him. He turned to look. He saw a 7-foot grizzly bear charging towards him. He ran as fast as he could up the path. He looked over his shoulder and saw that the bear was closing in on him. He looked over his shoulder again, and the bear was even closer. He tripped and fell on the ground. He rolled over to pick himself up, but saw that the bear was right on top of him, reaching for him with his left paw and raising his right paw to strike him. At that instant, the atheist cried out, "Oh my God!" Time stopped. The bear froze. The forest was silent. As a bright light shone upon the man, a voice came out of the sky. "You deny my existence for all these years. Teach others I don't exist, and even credit creation to cosmic accident. Do you expect me to help you out of this predicament? Am I to count you now as a believer?" The atheist looked directly into the light and said, "It would be hypocritical of me to suddenly ask you to treat me as a Christian now, but perhaps you could make the bear a Christian." "Very well," said the voice. The light went out, the sounds of the forest resumed, and the bear dropped his right paw, brought both paws together, bowed his head, and spoke. "Lord, bless this food which I am about to receive from my..." So I get to be the unbeliever. That's my experience. That's my experience, being the unbeliever. This talking deal is a funny deal. I'm blessed I get to do this fairly often, and I used to think that as I got clean and sober longer, that it would be more important as I did know more about the steps and more about the history and the tradition and all that stuff and how it works. And I thought it would be continually more important, what I was going to say. And the truth is that what I've learned is exactly the opposite. That 90% of what I was supposed to do today was done when I was standing here at 11 o'clock. That's just how that goes. And the reason is this. If there's, I don't know how many people, 600 people in here? I don't know how many people are here. But this is what I know. However many people are in here, okay? If there were 600 people in here, there would be 600 meetings going on. And how do I know that? I know that from this experience that's happened to me dozens of times. A few years ago, I was asked to speak at a meeting, and I hadn't been there for a little while, and I asked the chairperson, "What would you like me to speak about?" She said, "Speak about a step." I said, what step would you like me to? She said, "Whatever you want." I said, "Fine." Now, I hadn't been there for a while. Meetings wax and wane, demographics change. So I'm like, I don't know what it's going to be. You know what? If it's a lot of beginners, I'll do a meeting on the 3rd step. And if it's people that have been around for a while, I'll do a meeting on the 10th step. So I get to this meeting, and I'm sharing from the podium when I start just what I shared with you, that I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about. And then I said this. I said, and I can see that half the people in the room have been clean and sober longer than I have, so I'm not going to talk about step 3, and I'm only going to talk about step 10. Now, here's the best part. There's a friend of mine in this room tonight, and I get a call from her the next morning, and she says to me, "Hey, by the way, I had a sponsee at a meeting last night, and right before the meeting, she walked out and called me and said she didn't want to stay for the meeting because there was some old guy at the podium, and she didn't think she'd be able to identify. And I told her to go back in, and then she called me later, and based on what she was sharing with me, it sounded like you. Did you speak at such and such a meeting last night?" I said, "Yeah, actually, I did speak there." And she said, "That was so cool because I told her to go back in, and then she called me, and she was so grateful that I had told her to go back in because she's on step 3, and she said that the meeting was all about the 3rd step." How could that possibly be? My meeting that I was delivering was all about step 10. I specifically said, the only thing I said about step 3 was I'm not going to talk about it. How could that possibly be? Because God, in His infinite wisdom, enters into the room and meets all of us exactly where we are. How cool is that? She needed a 3rd step meeting. If she had heard my talk, she would have had a 10-step meeting. But she didn't hear my talk. God works His spiritual alchemy, and she heard exactly what she needed, provided we show up open and willing. It's all about the receiver. Not about this, it's about the receiver. So I guess what I'm really saying is at the end of this deal, like in an hour, in a half hour, whatever that is, if you didn't like the talk, don't blame the speaker. What I remember most about my childhood, get into my story here for a few minutes. I'm lucky. I was originally, the deal was I was going to speak until noon. Speak at noon, like noon to 1, right? And but there was a program change. Things change. We love change. Change is okay. Change is a good thing, right? And so I found out it was 11 o'clock. So the good news is that you get here and you get the meeting, in a sense, out of the way and then get a little earlier. The bad news is they forgot to change the ending time. So now it says 11 to 1. So is everybody comfortable? I won't do that. Give me the hook whenever you want. Just tell me. So anyways, going back to my childhood, and the biggest influence that I remember about my childhood is my father. Just an overwhelming influence in my life. And he was a really athletic guy into sports, and he taught me how to be an athlete. And he was a really smart guy, and he taught me how to think. And that was pretty cool, too, although my sponsor assures me that what goes on up here is pretty much for entertainment purposes only. And he was a tall guy, which meant that, he could reach the top shelf in the kitchen cabinet, and that meant he was the keeper of the Cheerios, and I liked that. But the one thing I didn't like about my father is he was an alcoholic. And he was an alcoholic who never found the rooms. And if he didn't die as a direct result of this illness, certainly as an indirect result, and he died way too soon. So I wanted to be like him in so many ways, but I just didn't want to be that. I didn't want to grow up to be an alcoholic, and I didn't want to grow up to be as bad as he was. And if I had a prayer at the time, it would have been that. Please, God, don't let me be that. And today, I live my life forward, but I understand it backward, especially spiritually. And what I know today is I need to be real careful about my prayers. I didn't grow up to be like him. I grew up to be so much less than him and so much worse off. For all my judgment on him, I had 5 kids, and he kept a roof over our heads and food on the table. I never remember a single night where he didn't come home. If there was something missing, maybe it was to be loved the way I wanted to be loved, for him to be as emotionally available as I would have liked. And if he was abusive at all, maybe it was in an intellectual sense. He loved to argue, and he passed that on. It's a gift. A gift, by the way, that does not serve us well in recovery. That's an albatross. That deal. So I want to be like him in so many ways, but I don't want to be that. So all my friends are drinking, and I see some people. I did do a little bit of drinking. And I see some people in here that identify with more my age group and probably remember some of the stuff. What I remember is like Bally High and Boone's Farm and Apple and I don't know if anybody remembers those, but one of the nice things, I know a lot of the younger people today, they're real involved in the green and environmentally conscious and whatnot. I think I can pretty much assure you that no actual grapes were harmed in the makings of Ripple, Bally High, and Boone's Farm Apple. We weren't doing any harm. But what I started to do was cultivate habits other than alcohol. And what I did is I smoked marijuana. And I smoked it a lot. And what would happen is I would go to a different place. Like I would just be like, whoa, off in a different place. And I remember going to school, and back then it was like almost culturally legal. You got in circles of 100 people on campus, everybody just lighting up, and it was just a different time, sex, drugs, rock and roll. And the thing about that is it just took me to this other place. And I remember I'd be like off in my own mind. I remember this one. I was at this dance, and this woman comes up to me and she says, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something. It's really important to me. And you're a sensitive guy, And I haven't shared this with anybody. Would you?" I said, "Yeah, sure. I'll listen." And I'm high. I'm whacked. And she's telling me about her thing, and I'm working on stuff. And I don't mean little stuff like my English paper and my math test. I'm solving big problems up here, like global peace, world hunger. I am working on stuff. Like, who am I? Why am I here? And how should I live my life? The cosmic spiritual questions. I'm a seeker. And she says after 15 minutes, "So what do you think?" It took a lot for me to share. And all I heard was, "Wah, wah, 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 wah." I have no idea. So I stopped doing it, not because I get some good idea that's, not to do it, because it's a failed experiment. And back then I do everything, ups, downs, sideways, electric, psychedelic, whatever. And I stopped doing it all just because it really doesn't work. And it looks like for a little while like I might lead a drug-free life, except for alcohol. And then somebody introduced me to a little white powder. Oh, my God. I thought I had found God. And if I hadn't found God, I had certainly found a higher powder. And it was working. And it worked. It was a spiritual solution for what was ailing me. And it took me away, and it took me to another place, and it worked. And if it still worked, you'd have another speaker this morning. It just stopped working. And today I know why. Because the power ran out. It's an insufficient power. I need, in this program, I need to find a power so big that it can hijack a mental blank spot. And cocaine can't do that. It can do it temporarily for a little while, and then it works till it no longer works. And I remember a lot of that. It was going back and forth. When I first got into recovery, and it was in an IOP. Anybody know what an IOP is? Intensive outpatient. Anybody know? Yeah, it didn't take. Turns out I needed more than that. And I didn't know anything about rehab. I was told I needed to go or get out, right? And I go, and I thought I was going to turn into be a socially responsible hard cocaine smoker. I didn't know what was. I thought they were going to show me how to control it and enjoy it, and they said, "No, you're a crackhead, and you can't drink either." It wasn't what I was looking for. It wasn't what I signed up for. And it takes me a couple more rehabs in a year and a half, to get clean in '92. And I remember she would leave. I remember at one time she thinks that my behaviors have changed, and she asked me if I've relapsed, and I said, no, no, I haven't, because I know I'm getting kicked out if I relapse. And she says, well, if your behaviors have changed like this and you haven't relapsed, you need to come see this psychiatrist, blah, blah, blah. And I go see the psychiatrist. The thing about that is it talks in the book. We don't give them an even break. No wonder they can't help. I go in there, and it's just me, and she says, your wife thinks you're using them. Oh, no, not using. And she says, well, then you need to take these psychological tests, whatever, profile tests, and I do that. The thing is, I just go in there doing what an addict does, finding the ways and the means, the lie upon the lie upon the lie, even when the truth would sound better, And by the time I leave there, I leave with an inner child. And the first thing I do is take my inner child and go smoke crack with him. It's like I walk in there, it's just me doing what an addict does. I could have been arrested for corrupting the morals of a minor for distribution to like an 8-year-old, when I left. Just doing what we do, right? And I remember, and I have some friends, and some of the differences between my friends, and I have some friends who are some hard partiers, and they might look at first like me, but then we get, I remember, Memorial Day, a weekend goes by, and we get, I get like an 8-ball for me and an 8-ball for him, and then 4th of July comes, and I'm like, hey, you want to do that again? I'll get some more. He's like, yeah, that was awesome. And I said, well, I'll get another one for each of us. And he goes, well, no, I still have 2 grams left. What? What are you talking about? Now, that's, what the best part of it? The best part is that what he says after that. Then he says, I'm a little concerned. We really partied hard on Memorial Day. Do you think I'm an addict? You have 2 grams left. You are not an addict. Give me your stuff. That's drug abuse. Just wired differently. And I wound up going to an Oxford house, and that's a different deal up there. I don't think they have them down here, but the inmates run the asylum. It's a funny deal. And I did get clean. I got clean in '92 for about a year, and after a year I relapsed. A little over a year I relapsed, and I didn't tell anybody because I was just starting to get back. I'd been out of the house and just starting to get friends and family back and stuff, and so I didn't tell anybody. And I got a good job. I knew I was going to be dropped, so I stopped, and I come back in, and I start to get my life back together, and I get back in the house and all that, and about after 3 years, I thought I had graduated. It was 3 years clean and sober again, and it took me about two more years to start the graduation party, but I did. If you would put a needle on me, put me on a lie detector at 3 years and asked me if I would ever use again, I would have said no, and the needle wouldn't have moved. I didn't know how that would happen, but I didn't think I was ever going to use again, And at 5 years, I was going through a takeover at work, and And I was coming home and complaining and whining about it every night to the future ex, and then selfish, self-centered girl that she was, she went and had a heart attack on me. While I'm going through a takeover that's going to cost me money, And, I went to the hospital that night and saw her, and she was going to have heart surgery the next day. And, at a time when she probably needed me more than she'd ever needed me, in her life, I asked myself a question. The question was, you need some relief, Tom. This is just too much, I have no sponsor, no support group. I've stopped going to meetings. My friends, I'm leaving them. They're not leaving me. Work knows that she's having heart surgery. I'm going to go out for a couple nights. Who would know? What's the difference? And I said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Now, I live my life forward, but I understand it backward, especially spiritually. And today I know that was the wrong question. The right question would have been, are you willing to lose everyone and everything? My decision was to go out for 2 nights and get a little bit of relief, if you had asked me, are you willing to give her up? Are you willing to give the life, the money, the job, the career, the family, everything for a line? I would have said no. I wouldn't have been for a line willing to do that. And you could have asked all my friends, my fraternity brothers, the same thing, and they would have said no. Then you give us all a line, and you ask us the same question. And they say, absolutely not. I'm not giving up my wife. I'm not giving up my life, my car, my money, my job, my future, my career, for a second line. But then you ask me that, and I would say yes. I would say yes for the second line. And how do I know that? Because that's what I did. I made a decision to go out for 2 nights. I didn't go out for 2 nights or 2 weeks or 2 months. That last relapse started in 1999 and ended in 2001. My clean date in June of 2001. And the bad news was that I had lost everything and everyone. And I remember when she caught me, when she found out that I had relapsed, and I wouldn't talk to anybody. Everybody wants to call me and the family and all this stuff and the concern. But my brother wouldn't give up, and I had to talk to him. And he said, how could you do this to her? How could you do this to us, meaning him and my 3 sisters? And he said, how could you do this to Mom? How could you do this to our mother? And she'd already been through it in the early 90s with me, And this is what I said with all the wisdom of a 10-year-old. You don't know a damn thing about this disease, Bobby. It's my problem, and the only one I'm hurting is myself. Do you believe that? How can a grown man say this? This is 14 years ago. It's my problem, and the only one I'm hurting is myself. And I think because, my mother's got, 3 daughters and some granddaughters and my brother and everybody else is doing well, that everything's okay, even though I'm a black sheep and doing this other stuff. Like, it's okay because of what everybody else is doing. Live my life forward, understand it backward. Today I know that a mother is only as happy as her saddest child, and that every night that woman went to bed wondering if I was dead or alive, praying for a call from me. Selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. If you were to close your eyes for a minute and imagine a website, it's called recoverymatch.com. In case you're new, there is no recoverymatch.com, as far as I know. But if you were to, and if you were to look at my profile when I get here, it would be the bedevilments on page 52, And so my profile would go something like, this is from We Agnostics on page 52, in case you don't know, it's called The Bedevilments. And it says, I'm having trouble with my personal relationships. I can't control my emotional nature. I'm prey to misery and depression. I can't make a living. I have a feeling of uselessness. I'm full of fear. I'm unhappy. I can't seem to be of real help to other people. And if we go to the beginning of the 3rd step and how it works, chapter 5, by the way, I'm also selfish and self-centered. I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. I step on the toes of my fellows. My troubles arise out of myself. They seem to be of my own making, and I'm an extreme example of self-will run riot. If you'd like to go out, call 561. That would be my profile when I get here. Coming to Cocaine Anonymous and taking the 12 steps to a spiritual awakening is about changing my profile. And my profile is different today. It would sound a little more like I know a new freedom and a new happiness. I comprehend the word serenity and I know peace. I can see how my experience would benefit others. I'm not afraid anymore. Somehow I intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle me. I don't know how it happened. It seems like God is doing for me that which I can't do for myself. And I'm happily and usefully whole. Please call 561. That's a different profile as a result of the 12 steps. I changed my... Don't go looking for that site. So I relapse. I have that conversation with him, and I get kicked out. And nobody will have me anymore, but my mother takes me, and I go to live with my mother for a little while. And you know why she takes me? Because she's my mother. That's the last house before this house, right? And she takes me. And I stay there, and I don't stay very long. You know, I go there in September of 99, and on Thanksgiving of 99, she says to me, I'm supposed to get clean and sober and go back and live my regular, normal life. And she says, I love you, son, and we're going to have a wonderful Thanksgiving dinner today. And it's just going to be awesome. Thanksgiving and turkey and stuffing and, you know, string beans and potatoes, all that stuff. We're just going to have such a wonderful meal. And after the meal, I'm going to ask you to leave, to pack your bags and leave, because you're killing yourself in my house, and what you're doing in my house, watching you kill yourself, is killing me, and I just can't live like this anymore. And I love you, son, but after dinner, I need you to pack and go. And I had to pack and go, you know. Yeah, it's not the only one we're hurting is ourselves, right? And I go, and that run lasts 2 years, and I get down here, you know, a dozen years ago. And I'm living in one of the local fraction resorts a little north of here. And I have, after 6 months, what I consider to be my first spiritual awakening. And then and I had a roommate there, and he had the same deal. He had been, you know, clean for 9 years and gone back out. I said, I need to talk to you. I said, I've been clean now for 6 months, and the obsession is lifted. And I've been clean before and put together time before, and I think I'm about to do it again. But if I don't change, what would stop me from going out again? 5 years, 15 years, whatever it is. If I don't change, my history is my destiny. If I want to know what next year's going to be like, and I'm unwilling to change, all I need to do is look at last year. If I want to know what I'm going to be thinking about next week, and I'm unwilling to change, all I got to do is look at what I was thinking about last week. My history is my destiny, and how could it be otherwise? I said, I need to find out what's going on in the rooms, you know, sponsorship, steps. And so I asked this guy, I'd met him 6 months earlier, and I asked him to sponsor me. He said, are you willing to go to any lengths to stay sober, and can you follow a few simple directions? And I said, yes. He said, have you ever tried this before? And I got on my high horse, self-will run riot, and said, oh yeah, hundreds of meetings. You know, I was clean for years. I said, the only 3 things I didn't do were get a sponsor, take the steps, and get this higher power thing. And he just gave me the little Cocker Spaniel, the little, like, you know, head to the side deal. And he said, oh, so you were a visitor. That was my first resentment from my new sponsor. Yeah. But he was right. I had been a visitor. I had been a thief in the rooms, stealing time from the fellowship. And this is only my opinion. It's certainly not in our literature. It's not in the book, but it's my experience. The punishment of the thief, his goods are never safe. The punishment of the liar, he can't believe anyone. The punishment of the adulterer is he can't trust his partner. And the punishment of the selfish and self-centered, he can never fully give nor receive unconditional love. I had been a thief in the rooms, you know. And I said to him, I have a confession to make. He goes, what are you talking about? He said, I said, I don't think this thing can happen for me. He said, this is available to us all. You know, God's grace falls evenly. You know, thank God. And I said, no, you don't understand. I don't believe in God. And I've been going to a meeting every day for the last 6 months, and everybody that has what I want, all these people that have time and that have this peace and this joy about them, this serenity, they talk about 2 things. They talk about a spiritual program and a higher power, and I don't believe in God, and I'm afraid this thing couldn't happen for me. And thank God, he was about 22 years sober at the time, and he second-stepped me right there. He said, are you willing to believe? And I was so damn desperate at the time, I said, yes. He said, that's all it's going to take to get started. And the feeling that I had was that it was like he had put his arm around me, you know, like, we're going to take a little walk. It's going to take 12 steps, and I'm going to be with you every step of the way. And then he was. You know, it turns out, you know, and he asked me to do some reading in the book. And, you know, those conversations with sponsors early on, it's like, you know, they start to give you a little, you know, a hard time about do this or do that. And it's like, hey, I'm a newcomer. I'm the most important person in the room, but they don't buy that, And I needed some information about the obsession of the mind and the allergy of the body, but that's about all the information I was missing. I needed that. And I think it's about all the information. I'm told to get an open mind, and I think it's so that I can, get all this stuff that I have to know. No. It's to let go of the stuff that I know to be absolutely certain that just isn't so. First step says that that we had to concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics, And I know that because the next line says this is the first step in recovery. But the gift of the first step is something different. I'm a guy who admits that I'm an alcoholic and an addict, and I go out. I work with lots of addicts that admit they're addicts and go out and do that white chip thing. The gift of the first step is that I accept without reservation that I can never safely drug or drink again. And that's the firm foundation upon which all the steps are built. Now, the thing is, I said, I was having a problem. I don't believe in God. And I was told to pray. Well, how am I going to pray? I don't believe. What would that be? And I was told to pray to whom it may concern, to God if you're there. And that's what I did. And guess who showed up? That's what I used to think. I started to show up and grow up. He was already there, And we get to the second step, and he knows that I'm having trouble with God. I don't believe. I'm the unbeliever. And we read We Agnostics, and We Agnostics is written for a guy like me, half the original 100 atheists and agnostics. It didn't stop them from taking the steps and having a spiritual experience, written for a guy like me. It's 164 pages, 11 chapters, and 12 steps, and what does it say? Let go, let God. And then there's one chapter, We Agnostics, chapter 4, written to me, the unbeliever, and what does that say? Get over it. But it's written for a guy like me. So it says, be willing to get over it. Be willing to be a former agnostic. And what does it say? We had to ask ourselves about one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there's a power greater than myself? And it says that can be the cornerstone upon which a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. I read that thing in the beginning. That's a dilemma for guys like me. Right in the beginning of that chapter, it says, to be doomed to an alcoholic or an addict's death, or to live life on a spiritual basis, aren't always easy alternatives to face. Did you hear that? To be doomed to the death of an addict or to live life on a spiritual basis aren't always easy alternatives. You know how long it takes a normal person to do that? I'll take door number 2, spiritual life, thank you. But for me, that's not an easy choice. I say something like, well, when you say an addict's death, like how bad would that be? How long would that last? And is it all right if I do a couple lines on the way? That's a thinking problem. That's a thinking problem. That needs to be changed. We go through that chapter, and that chapter is written for a guy like me. And you know what I find out when I go through that chapter? That the biggest difference between me and God is that he does not suffer the delusion that he is me. And that's made clear in the next chapter where I try to play the director. It's not God trying to play the actor. Boy, I'd like to be Tom today. Love to live Tom's life today. So I take that step on the backs of the guys that are the recovered alcoholics and addicts that have gone before me. It worked for them, and they say it can work for me too as long as I'm willing. And we get to the third step, and we get down on our knees, and he takes my hand, and we say the third step prayer. And I get up, and he gives me a hug, and I have a feeling of déjà vu, of never having been there before. I feel different. I feel different. I feel like whatever force I'm turning my life over to, that I'm taking it out of the hands of a powerless fool that can't manage it, and whatever force is going to direct it will do a better job than I've done. The evidence is my life. And probably my strong belief in my sponsor is serving me better than my weak belief in my higher power. But that's coming, because he's going to continue to hold my hand through the rest of the steps until he can get my hand into God's hand, right? And I would get to the fourth step, and I'm like a little hesitant on the fourth step, and I won't do it. And I call him up with problems. I've got romantic problems. I've got, money problems. And every time he says, wow, I can't believe how much the fourth step is going to help you. I'm like, no, I don't think you heard me. I don't have enough money to pay my rent at the halfway house. It's like, yeah, I can't believe how much the fourth step is going to help you, because he knew that his job was to get me through the steps. And if he started playing junior therapist and started solving all this stuff and took away the pain, then I wouldn't go on. He knew what his job was. His job was to get me through the 12 steps. And he was not confused about that. Thank you, God. And, And four is the beginning of life in the spiritual axiom. It says in the 10 step and the 12 and 12, other conference-approved literature. It is a spiritual axiom truth that every time we're disturbed, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with us. Got to find out about me. In the beginning, that looks like bad news, but, here in recovery, it's always like the bad news turns out to be the good news. Because let's say it was everybody else and everything else. I don't get to take their stuff to my God. Thank God it's my stuff, right? We go through the steps, and I do have a spiritual awakening. What time does this meeting end? Like how many minutes how long do? Done. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Just a couple minutes then. I don't talk about some other stuff, but if you're new in recovery, and you're thinking about that this isn't that you're not the problem, that you're the solution. That like I said to my brother, it's my problem, and the only one I'm hurting is myself. Let me just leave you with this. Try, our first step is that we admitted we were powerless over cocaine and other mind-altering substances, that our lives have become unmanageable, right? And what's the first step for, we have a sister fellowship called Co-Anon, right? Just like Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon, we have Cocaine Anonymous and Co-Anon. Now, they have a first step, too. You know what their first step is? We admitted we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives have become unmanageable. That sounds pretty similar, right? It's like the same step. Our traditions are a little different. Our tradition is that the only requirement for membership be a desire to stop using cocaine and all other mind-altering substances. Their third tradition says the only requirement for membership is that there be a problem of addiction in a relative or a friend. Did you hear that? In a relative or a friend. That means when you look at Al-Anon and Co-Anon and these sister fellowships, the whole reason that they exist, there's thousands of those meetings and tens of thousands of people going to those meetings today. And do you know why? Do you know what their problem is? Do you know why they're going to that meeting? Because they know one of us. They went out with one of us. They married one of us. They worked with one of us. They ran up against one of us in the express line at the supermarket and caught something. So if you're having trouble, if you're new and thinking that you're not the problem, try wrapping your mind around these sister fellowships, right? And I have had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. The last thing that he said to me at the end of that third step was, I want you to make a commitment. And the commitment that I want you to make is that you take the rest of these steps and have a spiritual awakening, and then you're free to go anywhere and do anything. And the reason it's so important that you do that is because if you don't do that, instead of carrying the message, you'll spread the disease. And the disease that you'll spread is that the 12 steps of recovery don't work. And the truth will be that you never did the work. And we're spiritual seekers. You know those cosmic questions? Who am I? Why am I here? How should I live my life? The 12th step of Cocaine Anonymous answered all three of those, having had a spiritual awakening. Who am I? I'm a spiritually awake addict. My name is Tom Roach. Why am I here? To carry the message to the addict who still suffers. And how should I live my life? I should practice these principles in all my affairs. God bless you.